Layla's here. Okay. So this meeting's topics we'll cover Beth Israel if we see Tom. Tom will, I mean Arthur Schwartz will be speaking to that issue. He's not confirmed. Um, we'll have Tom is out. He's got some medical issues. We'll have John Massengale here to speak about the City of Yes, and then we'll discuss it along with him. Um, some housekeeping. We've had a couple of interruptions, people breaking into our session and trying to disrupt it. If that happens, we'll try and block him out, send him to another room. And if anything goes down, we'll come right back up. And we hope you'll be back with us. Um, uh, Please email anything that you have on mind that you want to speak to and for the oncoming meetings. Um, Introductions. We've got a big agenda here, so a long discussion. So we're gonna start the meeting, but please put your affiliate next to your name, where you're from, so people know who is in the meeting. We have no policy meeting. We haven't had anything to latch on to discuss or to recommend. Um, Highlights, council highlights. Farms. We are open to anybody that wants to join us on our farm projects. We're looking for more volunteers. We're looking for funding. Our website is up. Our new website, we've still got some polishing to do, some work there to do. I need some board members. I need some people on the funding and finance meeting. Um, uh, Program managers. So if you have an interest in being involved in health, housing, or food initiatives, please let me know. Um, Anybody here? Alex, we've got some special introductions and highlights. Any updates that you want to present?
Just the thing about Mayor Adams wants 17,000 city-owned properties to be reviewed and analyzed for opportunities for new housing. And I mean, I think this should have been done a long time ago, but I'll view this as a positive.
That's good. I'm glad you bring that up, and make sure you bring that up when we speak about the City of Yes as well, because I think that has some pertinent. Uh, it's something we can discuss along with that. I think it's important. Anybody else with uh, highlights? Dina? I think I saw you pop in. Um,
No, I don't have any highlights.
how could you not have any highlights? You've been sending me a massive.
Okay. I have some. I like to research. I'm all about knowledge is power. So, it's getting to get involved with housing. There's so many people need housing. We need 2,400 one bedrooms and studios. So we're trying to get that. So that's what Mayor Adams want us to have to try to help people. So that's it.
Okay. And everyone, you're more than welcome to have your face on camera. We'd love to see your faces, but I know it's before coffee time, and I can understand it if you want to stay off camera.
Dina, can you refresh my memory? Are you from one of the public engagement units of
Yes,
the
I am. I'm correct. That is correct. I am
from
from there. Yes, I am.
HRA or which
HRA Home Support Unit, yes.
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So
Please
I
put
deal with
again.
landlords and brokers. So we're trying to get a lot of apartments for these clients to get out of shelter. So that's what we're trying to do,
Say
which
that
is
again.
challenging. I said that's what we need to get more apartments, ones and twos and studios for people to get help. So
Yeah. Are you involved? Are you involved with this any of these meetings in the interagencies, like with the mayor or anything like that? As far
Well,
as
I do reach out to certain organizations that will help because I used to work in a shelter. So I know that there's a lot of issues at hand or what people are going through since, like I don't know if you know Metro Plus helps people with housing. So John knows I'm all about researching and always giving out resources to help people because a lot of people are struggling, they get frustrated, and just to work with landlords, try to convince landlords to work with the city is not easy, but we do it because I convinced them to say, you're helping people get out of shelter and you're guaranteed money. Well, I could advocate if they don't receive any money, I can tell them who to contact, how they be able to help people because time is money. They have a mortgage payment. When the rent goes up, the mortgage payments goes up. So it's all about educating the people, not from the city level as well as the state and federal.
yeah, uh, I must have received about 20 emails from you just from this weekend.
I do, you know what I love to read, because I know that you go to those meetings and I know a lot of people don't. I love the research, as you know, that I'm all about knowledge is power, but I'm very shy. I like to do behind the scenes and, I'm all about getting involved in the community. I want to do outreach in the shelter to know that people, just because you're in a shelter, you matter. And I just want to make sure that people are good. That's what I love. Come on, I know, I love it. To tell you
Tina,
the truth,
oh, I'm glad to hear that you say that, and I'm glad you've been barraging me with these emails I have yet to get to.
I
And
know, but it's a lot because they
yeah,
have a one-shot deal training coming up, the homeless and their rights, the health housing. They're having those things, and it's free. It's on Zoom because we have to educate the landlords as well as the real estate brokers. I do. I mean, I do my part because they may not know what's going on, and then real estate brokers got it. That's their livelihood. They have to work with the landlord. If they don't do the right thing, the landlord will go to somebody else. You want to go to the best person to resolve the issues. So I always say knowledge is power. It's the not knowing that people suffer. So that's why I'm all about that because people just don't know. And that's why they're in these situations because people don't tell them, they hold them to information and they won't share it.
yeah,
So how are you going to help people if you don't know that? And you want people to resolve the issue? I think people in the top, we on the front lines, we see what works because I'm all about like going to the shelter, educating those. Sometimes there may be staff that are in the shelter. They may work in the shelter, but they may not know what resources are available to them. Like the Green Book, all the city agencies have.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of people they call 311, but you want a live person. You don't want to be on the phone for 2 hours. So
Tina, will you come back and would you do a presentation of your resources and so forth? I do want to speak to you too on the side and see what else we can do
okay, I'll do it. I mean, if they allow me, I will. I mean, John, you're not like me. I don't like to get in front of people. I like to, I mean, if I can help somebody, I would love it. But
okay,
I'm very shy behind the scenes. But you see the resources I give you. When it comes to that, I love it's my passion. It's just
yeah,
not a job to me.
it
So I
really
would
is.
love it.
Yeah.
It's a passion. If I could email people every day,
Okay, let's get you a spot on the newsletter because it really is a lot of information. And I was surprised when you started giving me a few, and then all of a sudden I'm getting this flood of information from you.
I know because
And
you on the front line. You know what it is, John. You help people, and a lot of people they just don't know. They're frustrated, they're aggravated, and I mean, I worked in the shelter. I've seen people have mental health breakdown, like a crisis, and you have to help people.
yeah,
You have to put yourself in those people's shoes. We could be homeless. Our health could fail. We could be right in that shelter ourselves. Life is life, and a lot of people don't realize that homeless people, they do matter
yeah,
and they just have a lot of things happen. You don't know why they became homeless. They could have became homeless. They could have been in a fire. They could have lost their job. They could have had anything. So we cannot judge the people because you don't know where they went through, what they went through. So it's all
exactly.
about trying to empower them so they can move on with their life and get keys in their hand. I'm trying to get buildings, but we need landlords, and we can get. I recruited a building before, but they turned it into a shelter. So,
Yeah.
but my focus right now is to get landlords as many buildings that, since Mayor Adams want us to get all these apartments, so we have to be go to real estate events, go to these landlord affordable housing conference events, so we can bring back and get people to get involved and work with the city of New York.
Yes. Okay. Dina, let's see how we can. I appreciate that, especially coming from an agency, your efforts, your outreach, and but let's discuss this
Okay,
offline and then
okay,
see.
okay.
And I don't want to spend too much time here on the introduction, but I really appreciate what you're doing and appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning.
Okay. Um, Peter Cook, thanks for being here. I appreciate you being here. Any updates from your end? I know you handle a huge congregation and interfaith full of different groups coming together, and you do an excellent job. You want to say hello to everybody, and do you have any updates for us? What you're doing? Must be getting coffee. Okay, Layla.
Actually, hi, John. This is Rashida Tyler. I'm the project coordinator, manager for the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative and the deputy executive director of the New York State Council of Churches. So I could give you a brief update on a little bit of what we're doing. We're preparing actually to have some statewide housing meetings. The first is a meeting actually of our housing committee, which is coming up on September 9th. And that's really to discuss the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, which is like the City of Yes, but at the state level. It's specifically for faith-based organizations. And then on the 19th of September, or I'm sorry, the 24th of September, we're preparing to have a statewide meeting for faith leaders to discuss just a broad array of housing issues, including the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, the City of Yes, but also right to counsel, housing access vouchers, other types of housing laws that are out there or need to be out there for faith leaders to advocate for in the upcoming session.
Okay. You have a flyer you want to put in a chat, and you want people to.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Rashida, I imagine you're here because of the topics, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And we'll get into that. We'll have that, and I hope you participate very a lot with this discussion too. We're going to lead off with John Massengale on that subject on the City of Yes. Anybody else have some quick updates before we move on? Okay.
Hi, Peter Cook.
Yeah, Peter.
Great. Rashida's definitely said everything I would have said, so I'm here to listen in on the City of Yes discussion, and looking forward to that. So,
Okay, great. Did you see our last month's by any chance, or last month's meeting? Um,
um, I did not.
okay. Yeah, we started with last month. We're just following up from last month. Great to have you, Peter. I sent you an email about our event on the 14th. Um, I hope you might want to join us for that if you're in town, or if Rashida is speak. That'd be great.
What day is that?
Saturday.
14th. Okay. Um,
If you need me to send it again, I will.
that would be good.
Okay, cool. And nice to have you. Suzanne, you're a new face to this meeting. Uh, any updates you want to speak to before we move on? Suzanne? Okay. She's having a little bit of coffee. Stepped away for the bathroom or something. Jerry, nice. I haven't seen you here in a while. Do you have any updates? You're on mute.
No, nothing new. Just listening in. How are you?
Good. All right. Good to have you. All right. We're gonna go ahead and move on then. Uh, um, I do want to speak to our before we get into the agenda. I do want to speak to our event September 14th, and we'll speak a little bit more afterwards too. It's a social justice and music fest. It's on 30th Street between 8th and 7th. It's going to run from 10 to 4. We have a lineup of a full day of speakers who's going to be talking about health, the Beth Israel, about housing, about homelessness, about right to counsel. We have our friends from Right to Counsel. We have about affordable housing, about development in the area. Uh, so and we have a few people there running independent on the independent ticket that's going to be speaking as well. So it's going to be a nice full day of speakers and music. If you guys don't know Steve Marshall, he has a lot of guest artists coming, and one of my favorite from my youth is Bad Company. Simon Kirk. He was the drummer for Bad Company. He's going to be popping in and playing, and so that's got me a little giddy. Anyway, so I do hope you're there. We've got room for people who wants to table an event. We've got still room on the roster for speakers. So if you have any interest, let me know. And we hope to see you all there in support. And of course, we're looking for donations. And so there's something that I want to follow up with last time. Rob, I know I'm not, we hadn't talked about this prior, so feel free to say something or pass. But the criminalization of homelessness, Rob's been very involved in that. Um, and there's a recent what would you say, Rob? A recent law that was put in place,
Oh,
right?
I don't, let me, if I could jump in here. It's not a, it's, well, I guess it is a law. It's underscoring some laws and ordinances that are popping up around the country. So there was a case that hit the Supreme Court called Johnson versus Grants Pass, where people in a small city in Oregon who had no alternative place to stay were sleeping on the street, and they were receiving tickets for that. And they started pushing back. It got into court, the court system in Oregon, ended up in state Supreme Court in Oregon, and it hit the Court of Appeal, U.S. Court of Appeals on the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit ruled in favor of the folks, and then the city of Grants Pass took it to the U.S. Supreme Court, which argued the case on April 22nd and came down with the decision the last business day in June. I think it was the 28th, whatever the date was. So Friday. I think this will have a ripple effect around the country. Later on this afternoon, I'm working with a group. I'm part of a group called the Institute for Global Homelessness. I'm on their advisory committee, but I have lived experience of homelessness, and there's a lived experience collective associated with this group. And we are formalizing a complaint to the UN around this issue. So while folks were just discussing, I was piecing together parts of that complaint, preparing, excuse me, for later on this afternoon discussion where we'll finalize that complaint and send it off to the UN. I think it's going to continue to have a ripple effect, but what it says to me is often we don't pay attention to who's being appointed to the Supreme Court. And I don't want to generalize and say everybody doesn't, but for the most part, in our everyday business, that's not something we pay attention to. But we've seen this court get stacked with conservative judges, and it's problematic. And we're going to constantly have problematic results like this. And I think when you're not given an alternative of some place other than the streets to sleep, but you criminalize people for that, that's problematic. And I use international human rights law to make those arguments And there are certain treaties and treaty obligations where government has a responsibility to make sure people have a right to housing. So that's the basis for our complaint. Once a complaint is formalized and sent off to the UN High Commissioner's Office, I'll distribute it to John, and he can distribute it to this group for their thoughts and any other comments they may have.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. And one more before we move on. Renee, any updates on your end with your work?
No, there are no updates.
Okay, very good. Thanks for being here. If there's no more quick updates, and of course you'll have some time maybe towards the end as well, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. Okay. Beth Israel, I don't see Arthur here. Arthur Schwartz is the lead attorney over the Beth Israel there. Just in case you don't know, Beth Israel has been on the chopping block. They've been wanting to basically get rid of Beth Israel, parse out the land for whatever, for developments, stripping away more hospitals. I think there's like a number of 50 hospitals that's been stripped away from in the past 10 years or so. We're hurting for hospitals. So there was they did stop it, but then of course, when it comes to development, they don't stop. So they're threatened, and it's in the courts, and there's a lot of groups coalescing to stop them from stripping away that particular hospital. It's a very good hospital. It's been around for a while, and it certainly helped me with a few people, getting people off the streets. They've had an amazing team. It's a great space. They've closed down some wings, and they've been working on this for quite some time to get rid of this hospital and take the land. It's very valuable land over there. But anyway, we'll move on to the next agenda since I don't see Arthur here. City of Yes, and basically development in general is what we're going to be talking about. And John Massengale's been on the front lines. He's been with the Empire State Coalition. We've been coalescing with them. I think most of you know about this. Layla's here. She's been involved. You know, and we've been battling the development. They've tied it in with some commercial development throughout the area, Penn area. We've been at this for about 4 years, wouldn't you say, Layla? About 4 years on this, almost going on
Yeah,
5, right?
that's about right. Started in 2020, indeed.
Yeah, 4 years. So as you know, they wanted to demolish the whole area. 20 million square feet they wanted to do. And they still want to keep it available to do so. They want to turn it into another Hudson Yards, is what they want to do. And they want to destroy housing, small businesses, people's homes, homes where people have had for a long time. And John has a viewpoint that he wants to express. And why don't I turn it over to you at this moment, John, and then you can, once you have your say, we'll open up for discussions and we'll go from there.
Thank you, John. So I'm an architect and urban designer. So one of my concerns is the form of the city. I'm revising a book called Street Design, which we say the design of the city begins with the design of the street. And I'm just concerned about the form of the city and what's been done to it in the last 10 to 20 years. And John knows that somebody incorrectly told me that I was not speaking this morning. And so I am just going to read from a piece that's about to be published. I've written a multi-part series on the city of Yes, because it's a very complicated subject. It's got 3 parts. Part 3 alone has almost 1,400 pages of revision to the zoning code. And how many people have read that? Very few. But it's it's a massive change. And second, before so I'm just going to read that since I wasn't expecting to speak, but I should say I don't know who's on the meeting today. John sent something I wrote around to his board, and I got quite a negative reaction from one of his board members. And not, well, so we'll see what happens today. And in the chat, I put a link to last week I had a piece in Strauss News, which is 4 Manhattan newspapers, West Side Spirit, they have one for the Upper East Side, one for Chelsea, one for downtown. So, and that is sort of the first 2 parts, which I further broken down, but I put that link in the chat. So to read from this, it's called Unaffordable Housing in the Real Estate State and the City of Yes. The City of Yes debate continues. New York City Council amended and approved the first 2 sections of Mayor Adams's and Big Real Estate's 3-part City of Yes planning and zoning overhaul. And I say that so many times I've called it COI, C-O-I. Public review of the final section, the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, COI-HO, is underway. It is the most controversial and consequential City of Yes proposal. The 1,386 pages of change proposed for COI-HO include many points good and bad. Big Real Estate says COI-HO will create more housing for all. However, many of the revisions make it easier for developers to build highly profitable luxury apartment towers. If the City Council approves all of the changes, many neighborhoods will become more expensive. For Manhattan in particular, COI-HO is a neoliberal vision in which the rich get richer and the poor get evicted. The rise of the real estate state. The 3 most important factors for evaluating real estate are famously location, location, and location. Market determinants in Manhattan, New York, are significantly different than in Manhattan, Kansas. The most profitable buildings in the history of New York are the super luxury, super tall apartment towers marketed to the global rich as a new asset investment class. Saying yes to more of these safe deposit vaults in the sky is one of the driving forces behind the City of Yes. Industry used to be an important source of wages and taxes in New York. Manufacturers wanted inexpensive land for factories and low-cost housing for their workers. Since the decline of industry in New York and the near bankruptcy of the city a half-century ago, however, New York has increasingly looked to property taxes to fund the city budget. In 2019, property taxes supplied 49% of New York City's tax revenues, more than twice as much of the total as the second largest source, which was income taxes. That gives power and influence to big real estate. Big real estate describes the 10 to 15 companies and families that own and build New York's biggest buildings and developments. You might call them the anti-industrial real estate complex, because they don't want low-cost land for housing and manufacturing. They want to buy low and sell high, converting the factory and shipping sites on the harbor into prime waterfront sites for luxury housing. The profits have contributed to making them the most powerful group of political donors in what the planner Sam Stein calls the real estate state. You can see what they build on Billionaires Row at Hudson Yards and in the new super tall towers around Grand Central Terminal. Those unpopular buildings and places are the poster children for the City of Yes. COI began in 2022 as a set of proposals for a new New York, written by a public-private partnership led by a who's who of the city's power players in business, finance, real estate, and politics. At the top was one of the most important figures in creating Hudson Yards and Billionaires Row, Dan Doctoroff, whom I say more about below. One of the super tall residential towers on Billionaires Row, designed by my old boss, by the way, one of the super tall residential towers on Billionaires Row was the most profitable building in the history of New York. Making it easier to build more super luxury super talls was one of the panel's top goals. Earlier, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's planning commissioner, Joe Rose, proposed a thorough zoning revision that would have prevented super tall residential towers. Rose is a third-generation member of one of New York's most successful development families, and he spent years trying to sell the plan to his friends and colleagues in big real estate. In his telling, when he finally put the plan on Mayor Giuliani's desk, a phone call from some of the biggest developers killed the plan within half an hour. When Mayor Michael Bloomberg came into office, some thought the influence of big real estate might decrease. Mayor Mike was the richest man in New York, after all, able to self-fund his political campaigns. He didn't need donations for big real estate, but his post-Reagan neoliberal politics meant he supported public-private partnerships between the city and the largest, richest businesses, as we see in John's district at the related companies at Hudson Yards and Vornado around Penn Station. Bloomberg commissioned a study by McKinsey & Company that recommended that New York become a luxury brand for which you pay a premium. Bloomberg's second in command, Deputy Mayor Doctoroff, reorganized all the city departments involved in planning, housing development, and economic development into a group that worked together for the first time, all reporting to him. The old economic development emphasis on building low-income housing and working in poor neighborhoods with poor access to capital changed to supporting and subsidizing large-scale, expensive projects by the richest developers. That was how Atlantic Yards, Hudson Yards, Billionaires Row, and all the new luxury towers next to the High Line and new riverfront parks came to be. Dr. Rolfe was later the co-chair of the New York panel. Mayor Bill de Blasio had high hopes for creating new affordable housing. Soon after taking office, however, he had a lunch with the Real Estate Board of New York, aka REBNY, Big Real Estate's mouthpiece, at which he announced a deal that the city and big real estate would work together, building apartment towers as tall as necessary to get more housing. REBNY and other advocates for COI frequently argue that more housing of any kind will trickle down into more affordable housing for all. But that has not been true in New York. A massive rezoning along the river in Long Island City created over 30,000 expensive new apartments. New apartments are good and needed. However, the new luxury units displaced residents in low-rent apartments. Despite inclusionary housing regulations, the average two-bedroom rent in the neighborhood went from $3,400 a month to $5,300. Median household income almost doubled, going from $52,000 to $97,000. Not surprisingly, diversity in Long Island City decreased. A large upzoning in Soho and NoHo that benefits a few deep-pocket developers who are warehouse sites will have a similar effect there, not only in Soho and NoHo, but also in the neighboring Chinatown. Over the years, following big real estate's plans resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of rent-regulated apartments. The super profitable 932-foot super tall on Billionaires Row at 220 Central Park South replaced a 20-story rental building with roughly half the same number of apartments, a third of which had been rent stabilized. One apartment in the new building sold for $238 million as a pied-à-terre for a Chicago billionaire. How is that supposed to trickle down? Thinking it will is like believing that quadrupling the supply of Lamborghinis while simultaneously decreasing the number of inexpensive used cars will somehow lower car prices for all. Reaganomics promised trickle-down income, but Reaganomics shrank the middle class and transferred $50 trillion up to the 1%, contributing to the ever-growing income inequality in America and New York City. We have a housing crisis across the country and the continent. Every city that has a strong market for expensive houses has a shortage of low-cost housing. Cities like New York and Vancouver that attract buyers and investors from around the globe are especially unaffordable. Buy land, they're not making it anymore, Mark Twain said. That is not true in Dallas or Phoenix, cities that sprawl out into new single-family subdivisions on cheap sites in the desert. But the global rich want to be in Manhattan, not New Jersey, Staten Island, or even Phoenix. Big real estate solution is to build taller and taller in Manhattan. That's good for selling to Russian oligarchs, but there are inherent problems for the rest of us. The taller a tower is, the more it costs to build per square foot. The towers make the land expensive too. Towers are inherently expensive, in other words. Nevertheless, in expensive neighborhoods where the land is already some of the most costly in the world, the city of Yes proposes apartment buildings that are more than 50% bigger than currently allowed, with no affordable housing required. The Upper West and East Sides of Manhattan are already two of the three densest neighborhoods in the Western world. Big real estate doesn't care about that, or what sort of city New Yorkers want. They're asking New York's politicians to say yes to super tall apartment towers so they can make higher profits, pun intended. We will look at how that could damage the quality of life in New York City, and we will look at alternatives for making a better city with affordable housing for all. Next, part 2. I'm a New Yorker, not a NIMBY. So that is it.
That's a nice point to end on. You cover a lot of ground there, John. It's a well thoughtful article, and I'm glad you sent it to me for me to read. And and any comments, Layla? You want to add on to that? Any thoughts on your side?
No, this is very comprehensive. I think that John really, tackles the historical context and the current dynamic extremely well. I agree with most, if not all, of his points. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm putting a developer's letter. I did a 15-pager, and all these long articles that are done are, they're well thought out. And John has got a lot to say on this subject, and I know the larger letters are hard to get into the media, and a lot of people don't want to take the time to read it. And I'm glad you read this today. It forces people to hear what you have to say. And Rob has a comment. Rob, you want to join us here?
Sure. So thank you, John. And I really thank you for quoting one of my best buddies, and that is Sam Stein. I knew Sam as a union organizer. I mentored him through his PhD, and we still collaborate while he's working at Community Service Society. So we are very close. One of the things I think we're guilty of, and when I say we, I mean us, the community, and this particularly in homelessness, we're good at outlining what is wrong. What I'd love to see us do is put energy into solutions. Obviously, big development doesn't have the solutions for us. Their solution is we're going to continue to build for profit. The question for me is, and I know this is a tough one, how do we remove land from the market and create communities that are self-governed, or where we can build truly affordable housing and maintain that affordability? I think that's the big struggle that we're facing, and I think that's where we need to direct our energy. Land as a commodity is something that exists particularly in Manhattan, one of the boroughs where it's just gone off the chain. I teach a course in urbanism at the New School, and I always ask the students, especially the ones who come from outside of the US, name me one-story building in Manhattan, and they look at you dumbfounded when they start to think. There are very few of them, and that's part of the problem, right? You can go up, and anybody who has a one-story building will sell to a developer for $50 million in a heartbeat, right? So I think what we need to do is figure out solutions to this problem. Government is not going to do it. Big development is not going to do it. I think the solution has to come from the people. So how do we put our collective energy together to figure out the solution to a problem that exists for us? That's my thought. But I definitely appreciate the way you laid it out. A lot of thought went into that, and it's a lot of the history that I'm, familiar with. But it's always good to point people in the direction to understand the history, especially like students, right, that I work with, and some of the students that Sam and I continue to work with. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rob. We need to protect our land, and in my viewpoint, City of Yes, and what stripping down regulations and using the need for housing as to do it is stripping away our assets. So that's so pointed, Rob. And I know we've got some people here that are for City of Yes, and we'd like to hear from you. Let me go to Layla. She has her hand up. She apparently have something to add.
Yeah, thank you, John. And Rob, thank you for always pointing us to the right direction on, how to think about the issues. I totally agree with you. I think that, looking at the possible solutions is really very critical. So I am a member of the board of an organization that is called This Land Is Ours. It's a community land trust. It is associated with Cooper Square Community Land Trust, one of the oldest and most historic land trusts in the city and in the country. And I think that the model of the community land trust holds part of the solution. But I think that it is really critical for all of us to see the value of public housing. And right now, NYCHA has a bad rap because NYCHA is mismanaged, not because NYCHA doesn't work or that NYCHA is inherently flawed. Public housing is the gold standard. And it is the gold standard in this country. It is the gold standard in the world. And if you look at the Greek book by an Australian economist, Cameron Murray, he actually talks about the impact that public housing development has had, in various countries throughout the world after the Second World War. And it has been really critical. And there was a lot of it that was built and also, a little bit pre-war. And this is something that we have to advocate for. So when we shift this conversation to the political field, we're told, well, NYCHA is the largest public housing authority in the country, and it relies on public funding at the federal level, and the feds are not really interested in funding New York because Massachusetts or Wyoming or Idaho, they don't care about New York. So I would like for us to start thinking about housing on the political front the same way we think about transportation. If indeed Idaho doesn't care about New York, then why do they fund our infrastructure? And they do. The New York region, metro region, receives most of the funding for rail and infrastructure because everybody knows in the country that this is where the economic strength and the economic engine of the country is. And if it is true for our transportation system, then it is also true for our housing authorities. So I think we need to start framing the economic conversation because it looks like, this is an argument that people are very receptive to. I mean, we look at the human side, but when we talk to economists and politicians, maybe they seem to be more responsive to the economic argument. The economic argument is that the strength of our workforce is in the Northeast, and it needs to be housed, and therefore it needs to have the federal funding. And I think that if we start to push this narrative, rather than embracing the narrative of NYCHA is decrepit, we can we can really make a dent in this conversation. So just once again to echo what Rob just said, I think that community land trust model and public housing are really, two ways to tackle this issue, rather than relying on a free market, which the free market is entirely agnostic. The free market doesn't care whether we're well housed, poorly housed, it's quality housing, it is decrepit. The market does not care. The market has one duty, is actually to make money. That is the only duty of the market. So why are we buying the false narrative and the false promise that the market is going to come to the rescue? And I will end with that.
That's brilliant. Always good to have you. You add a lot of brilliance, Layla. Thank you. And Rob's on that board, actually, the Community Land Trust Cooper Square. He's been there with that group for a bit, and we've had Lynn here. We've talked about land trusts, and we're fully behind that. And John, you have something to add?
Yes, Rob and Layla, of course, I agree. Of course, we need solutions. I'm also going to say that the city of Yes and YIMBYs and big real estate are extremely well organized. And they have a very simple argument. And if you make a simple argument in return, they show up and they say, no, build, 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 build. And they convince a lot of people. And so what I've done in this series is I've got 4 parts. The first part I just read to you. The second part is about YIMBYs and NIMBYs and why it's ridiculous to say that, if you don't want Hudson Yards, you're a racist, and which will be said at public meetings. And how much the city is under the thumb of companies like related companies. The third part is a look at how New York City was built. I wrote a book called New York 1900 with Bob Stern, who's the one who designed the 2 most profitable buildings in the history of New York. And I've discovered in the City Club Urban Design Committee that there are a lot of people who work 20 or 30 years for the city who don't know the history of the city before zoning. And they say things that are absolutely untrue. They don't know why people like the neighborhoods that are the most liked in New York City. Mark Levine, who I think he's honestly saying it, but he says things that are absolutely untrue about buildings. And, a standard YIMBY line, oh, you don't like tall buildings? You're not a New Yorker. You should move to, St. Louis. Well, the history of New York is that office districts and residential neighborhoods were built differently. And there was a lot of concern about sunlight on the street and sunlight in the apartments and the character of walking around the street. And you see this as you walk around. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail now, but that's an important part of part 3. And then part 4 is solutions, of which there are many, ranging from, there are some good ones in the city of Yes. There should be some rezoning. Mayor Bloomberg made a deal with Queens Council people. They let them upzone Long Island City in return for downzoning single-family zones, which, New York City should not have any single-family zoning unless those are row houses. And but then all the way up to things like Rethink New York's plan for looking at New York City as a region and spreading, there's cheaper land out at the railroad stations, and land is very important in the cost of building.
That's a very good point. Yeah, we've spoke about that quite often. It's been in our forums too, about spreading that energy outward and connecting on a broader scale. I think your point about the air and greenery is so important for residents. It's so important for our sanity. Really, I mean, otherwise we're like rats in a maze. And I appreciate that really so much too. Um, yeah, Peter has a comment here. Peter, why don't you join in?
Hi, everybody. So I guess I have two questions. So this is a City of Yes. I mean, I think is really trying to deal with an incredibly arcane zoning system that really prevents the production of housing, but particularly affordable housing. And one of the things that we really struggle with is the zoning fights over being able to build. And so this feels to us like a really positive step forward. There are provisions in here that would make it easier for faith-based properties to be able to convert to affordable housing, while that would right now be fairly prohibitive. Um, and and then also be able to transfer development rights, they're called TDRs, to help generate revenue to fix up houses of worship, which are often in decline, while being able to build um, more housing and affordable housing. So my question is, from this group's perspective, what do you think of those proposals? And particularly with the emphasis on the part of City of Yes to build higher density affordable housing in the outer boroughs, going to 3 to maybe 5 stories instead of being locked into 1 or 2 stories. That seems like a positive move. But I also hear a lot of skepticism about that and a lot of reticence, and I'm trying to understand what that's about.
John, you want to add? Layla? Layla's got her hand up. Layla, you want to hit that
I'm
first?
happy to take this one, but it's John's show, so John, maybe you
Lead?
want to take it.
Well, where to start? The City of Yes is about the market. It is not about affordable housing, except as an add-on in inclusive housing. So in the case of Manhattan, for example, there are 2 new zones for Manhattan. R12 allows 50% more FAR than is currently required, plus you can get 20% bonuses. But you can get those bonuses without any affordable housing. 0 affordable housing. And no developer is going to tie himself to permanent relationship with rent-regulated tenants when he can get the bonus from a way that makes money for him. It's just not going to happen. And in the in the outer boroughs, where we do have less expensive land, the 2 biggest costs in building are land and construction. And we have less expensive land in the outer boroughs, and the least expensive building type to build for housing is the 5-story walk-up. We should allow a lot more of that. There are people that teach how to do that without being, a deep pocket developer. How community groups can do it, and but that is not the emphasis of the City of Yes. How is that housing going to get built? Affordable housing in New York is primarily built through subsidies, And those are limited. They're in great demand. They take years to get. And the last thing I would say is that actually, New York City is a very easy place to build if you want to build as of right. Where it becomes complicated is when you want a special permit. If we have the right planning, we don't need special permits. If we have planning that says what the city wants, we don't need special permits. And then, you know, compared to the suburbs, it's much easier to build here. You know, you don't have to worry about things like keeping the water on your site. You just plug into the utilities. You don't have to worry about setbacks. You just build right up to the street. And a friend, Gib Vaconi, pointed out to me recently that the White House made a statement about how difficult it is to get special permit building in New York City, and that was an example of why we need to change zoning. And there are a lot of problems with zoning, but we need planning or whatever type it is that does not rely on big real estate asking for special permits. And because only big real estate can afford that process, while the little 5-story walk-up can be built by a community group. And, you know, it's just, yes, there are good things in the city of yes, we need reform, but I don't think the city of yes is designed to give us a better city that New Yorkers want. It's designed to make more profits.
Yeah, we haven't really solved a lot of issues to begin with, and we're going to create a whole new pathway to make things worse. I mean, we don't take care of the oversight. We don't take care of the tenants that are there. We don't prevent the warehousing. We don't tax properly. We let the empty apartments be tax abated, and then we tax in the wrong places. We don't give the incentives. I remember back when in Midtown, when all these hotels shot up, they kept the rentals heights low. They allowed the commercial to grow. And what happened, what resulted was a boom in the hotel industry, commercial industry, and the squashing of rental buildings. They bought them out as quickly as they could. I've seen them disappear in no time. I had a discussion with a hotel operator who illegally took, well, the building owner sold it illegally. It was a tenant building. They pushed all the people out. And so they had a stop order on it. And I was trying to talk him into doing housing, especially during a pandemic. And he had no interest in it. He said there's no way he would put that kind of investment in. And with that, Layla, I know you've got, and we've got another question up too. So Layla, you want to add on to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter, for your question. I think that, you're raising an important issue. And I think that for places of worship, being able to capitalize on the vacant land that they own is something, it is a strategy that has been explored, and the zoning can get in the way. I will speak for myself. I will say that the current existing TDR program allows already for this kind of transfer. It is fairly restrictive. You cannot transfer, to a broader radius. The city of Yes would allow for transfer to be broadened a little bit. I think this is a good thing. I think that being able to transfer air rights and benefits the existing landmark, has a preservation effect on the landmark property, and allows for the shifting of density. It's good overall. On the development of the land itself, there is actually no mandate for the land that would be owned either by a place of worship or any other type of campus. There is no mandate for this development to be affordable. It is the preference. It's UAP. All right. It's the universal preference. So it is a choice. It is not a mandate. And I think that, I mean, I've heard you testify at the City Planning Commission, and, I really appreciate all the work that you do around that. I would actually really urge and encourage you to join us in actually asking for any affordable housing or any, housing initiative to have a mandate. And the Department of City Planning is absolutely adamant that a mandate is not constitutional. And this is why they don't want to add it. And I really strongly object. And many of my friends who are constitutional attorneys also object. A mandate is constitutional. And you know what? Quite frankly, whether we restrict ourselves to actually not imposing a mandate, or we impose a mandate and then the Supreme Court tells us that it's not constitutional, let's take the chance. Let's ask the Supreme Court what they think, rather than censoring ourselves and being like, oh, we really don't want the Supreme Court to tell us that we can't do it. In the meantime, Westchester does it. Mount Laurel, New Jersey is, notorious for the Mount Laurel doctrine that basically imposes a mandate on affordable housing. California, I mean, we can go on and on and on with all the municipalities and, various jurisdictions that are actually imposing housing mandates. The other thing that I will say is that right now, the Department of City Planning is telling us that inclusionary zoning is actually detrimental to housing production. There was a paper published by UCLA in June, I think, that basically, crunched the data, and that shows that if you have inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning, then it has a deleterious impact on the general overall production of housing, including market rate, because if you need to include affordable, then it means that the general market rate will be more expensive because it needs to absorb the cost of the affordable housing, and that therefore there is less appeal for that kind of product. So now we're being told that actually affordable housing, if there is zoning incentive, is actually detrimental. So we are sort of like banging our head against the wall, basically saying the only way we can get out of this funk is by entirely 100% relying on the market, which once again, the market is not there to address the housing issue. And the problem with housing is that it is not a commodity like any other commodity. It does not react to the simple factors of supply and demand. What housing does, and Adam Smith, who was, the pope of, supply and demand, showed in his research that actually housing is an extractor of wealth, that basically the landlord will take whatever the tenant can afford. So if you're in a wealthy community, the rent will be higher than in a less wealthy community. So this is why I think that, we are probably philosophically very much aligned with, this notion that, housing needs to be affordable, that it is not really an issue of, just building so that more billionaires and more oligarchs can have, trophy properties because they collect such properties. We need affordable housing. And, I would really invite you to read John Massengale's piece and others to see why we're fighting the city of Yes. And I think that there's a lot of common ground, between our positions.
Thank you so much for that, Lila.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So you're saying that the requirement that if you want to go 3, 4, 5 unit stories in the outer boroughs, you can only do that unless you're building, you can only do that if it's affordable, is not strong enough, that there should be a stronger affordability mandate than what's built into that right now?
That's correct. Right
And
now,
why is that?
If you want, because in the end, the market will be more favorable to supporting the as of right building rather than the affordable building. So if you're not mandating the affordable units, you're not going to get them. The developer, the lender, because in the end, it is not about the developer, right? It is about the lender. The lender is the one who controls the output. And the lender is going to say, I'm not really interested in your affordable housing thingy because I'm not going to make more money. And I want to minimize my risk. And therefore, I'm going to give you the money to build a project, but I want it to be 100% market rate because I don't really trust this tax incentive. It's uncertain. It's reliant on the state legislature, which may be capricious. One year they may like it, the next year they may decide to do away with it. What am I left with? Right now, you're telling me that I'm going to have a tax abatement for 20 years, but what if the state legislature decides that, they want to cut it down to only 10 years? The math doesn't add up. So there is an incentive from the lender's perspective to actually not fund the affordable housing and to say, I like the as of right. Just go with the as of right. That's what I want you to build. And here is your loan, and I want 10 to 15% return on my investment. Which is why, once again, if you are strictly relying on the market is not in the business of addressing social issues. The market is in the business of making money. And the lender is correct. We cannot blame the lender for doing his job exactly rigorously. And what we here around this table are in the business of is to actually advocate for the greater good, to actually think about policy. We're not in the business of making sure that the lender makes money. The lender does that very, very well. And the developer does that also very, very well, which once again, everybody needs to play their part. And the part that we are playing as advocates and the part that we want elected officials to play as representatives of the people is actually to advocate for the greater good.
Excellent said. Excellently said. It's a basic human need. That's where the split is. They see it as profit. We see it as a basic human need. And Rashida, I think you've had that hand waving for a bit. Do you want to chime in?
Sure. So this summer we had a series of conversations with faith leaders. They were virtual sessions, but they were across New York City. And the sentiments, much of the sentiment was the same, which is that churches, faith-based organizations want to help with the affordable housing crisis. They want to build for their communities. They're really feeling the housing crisis impact with, lessening membership as families move out of New York State. But I think that there is a hesitancy, and with good reason via the history, to be a little bit skeptical of the city of yes. And what I'm seeing is that it confuses the necessary with the sufficient, being that it is necessary to build more housing but that it's sufficient, that will accomplish having it being more affordable housing. And I think we're seeing that even at the federal level, where, Kamala Harris has said that she's going to solve the housing crisis by building our way out of it. And so that rhetoric of more housing production equals more affordable housing is something that I think really has to be separated and disaggregated in the public sphere. So when these arguments are made, it's not easily to be conflated that just because you're building more housing means that we're going to have more affordable housing. I think also that we heard from faith leaders that, they have concerns about height and what's, going to be use restrictions, what's going to be in the neighborhood. And I had an opportunity to sit down with a developer and ask him, if you could develop here, we were in, I think, Midtown Manhattan, would you develop here or would you develop where the land is cheaper in one of the outer boroughs? And he was like, he admitted he would choose to develop in the outer boroughs and he would not choose to develop affordable housing. So I think that as advocates, as people who actually want to see affordable housing built, we have to make the case of one, what we actually want to see. What are the policies that can be included? If the city of yes is going to be debated, what do we actually want to see within it that would help actually accomplish affordable housing? And two, what is an alternative plan? Like, not just here's a problem with this one. What is the people's plan? What is the plan that will actually get what we want? And so those are kind of the things that I would like to see come out of these discussions across the city is number one, more actual policy change that we can present to the city department of city planning, and then also to the mayor's office. And then number two, if those changes are not met, what alternative plan is there that we can propose?
That's brilliant question, Rashida. Their propaganda machine runs strong in 24 hours, and we do have to break that. And we do have to, and I've said this too, and we've all said this, and actually we were all had a lot of discussions and working towards that. And I think this discussion really helps. Layla had pushed for a community-led plan. And I think that's what we need to do. And I think Rob said it best. It's got to come from us. It's not going to come from them. So I think you're right on with that. And I hope you will be involved, maybe participate, because I think we're getting to that. And I think we do need to focus on that. And Layla, I know she's and John's got his hand up too. John, you want to take it from here?
Well, Peter, it looks like you were leaving. I just wanted to say I put a link in the chat that I think you'll be interested in. This group, the Incremental Housing Development. They teach how to do inexpensive housing without being a big developer. In fact, they teach people how to become small developers. And that's the type of building that does trickle down. In fact, if you build if you build 100 5-story walk-ups in Queens, you will affect the price of low-cost apartments. But, the fact is that the market, that's not, as Layla said, that's not what the market is supplying. They are supplying expensive apartments. So that if you want to pay $10,000 a month for rent, or you can pay $1.5 million to buy an apartment, you can go out tomorrow and look at 100 apartments and find one that you love. The problem is not housing supply. The problem is inexpensive housing supply.
Yeah, well said. John, you want to bring those folks in for a discussion maybe next month?
They have a sort of New York phobia.
Why?
They're mainly down south and in the Midwest, and the guy actually who founded the movement was once a plumber in New York City.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't think Mayor Adams is going to listen to him.
No, he won't. But that's not who we're trying to convince. We can't convince those people to listen when they've got an ulterior motive in the plan. Okay, we have to. I can't bring people together. Critical.
There are architects in New York. John West knows several of them, who specialize in the least expensive legal housing construction in New York City.
Why don't we bring them both in? Why don't we ask because I'd love to talk to them, especially if they're down south. I came from Kentucky, if no one knows this. I grew up there. So I love it when I run into people from the south. And so let's try, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That could be a really cool discussion next month. Okay.
And
Rob,
Ted could play a role in that.
who?
Ted Houghton.
Oh yeah, Ted. Yeah, definitely. Ted's
Sorry. I apologize to Rob, but I did see Renee's hand and then it vanished. Renee, do you want to get on the mic?
Thank you, Alex.
Everyone keeps discussing affordable housing.
Yes.
How do you define that?
Yeah, I hate that word.
Well, there is a standard definition by HUD. Affordable housing is 80% of the AMI.
True. But is that really
Or
the
less.
definition of
Yeah.
it?
which
No,
in New York City is quite high.
we
Yes,
we we agree. Yeah, and especially because New York also lumps Putnam County. So that also pushes up the AMI. No, Renee, we totally agree that it is absolutely not affordable. But that is the definition of affordable
right.
housing.
You know, if
So even if indeed there was a mandate, or even if a developer were to choose, to have elect the preference to actually build affordable housing in exchange for a subsidy and additional density, then those units would be, blended would be 80% AMI. And it has to be, it cannot be just 80%. It should be a blend between, 40%, 60%, and then you can go all the way to 100% blended. It has to represent 80, total 80%. And that would, uh, allow for a much denser building, and that would give you a tax exemption, meaning you pay zero real estate taxes. Right now, the 485X, which is the new 421A, calls for a 40-year tax exemption. So it's pretty substantial.
Right.
Rashida, you had something to say about that. Rashida?
Sorry. Yeah, I just included it in the chat. Which is there is currently a bill that's actually been reintroduced at Congress, and it's intended to actually change the way the AMI, particularly for New York City, is calculated. So it's HR 7739. I believe that's still the bill number. It's sponsored in the House by Yvette Clarke and in the Senate by Kirsten Gillibrand. And it particularly deals with calculating New York City's AMI, and trying to weed out, including, I believe it was Westchester County, that inflates the AMI. And so if we're going to look at how we're defining affordable and look at AMI, we have to also look at ways to make sure AMI, or whatever calculation it is actually realistic. Because at least in my city, which I'm in Ulster County, New York, but the AMI doesn't reflect the average income here. The Council of Churches covers the whole state, and AMI is something that I've just heard over and over again as being problematic. It's an artificial calculation that doesn't really serve anyone. And because it's at the federal level, a lot of organizations use that as their demarcation of affordable. If you check out that legislation, I think it's something that we can push for, and I think people are open to recalculating or finding an alternative measure that would actually help accomplish affordability.
If our friend Luana was here, she would say, "Stop using the term affordable." she would scream it. She would scream at us for that. Anyway, Rob, you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I stopped using that term a while ago. I like to use a monetary calculation, but with respect to AMI, going back to my days at Picture the Homeless in 2007, I once had a debate with Vito Lopez when I said it was a flawed calculation because it includes Putnam County, Nassau, and Suffolk, and the 5 boroughs. It's artificially inflated. And he asked me how I would change it in front of all of these elected officials at the table. And I looked him in the face and I said, use zip code. The entire fucking country is mapped by zip code. And his lip was zipped. Tish Gaines was a council member at the time, was kicking me under the table. Like I never saw him shut down like that, right? So it's about political will. Let's be real about this. With respect to something John said a minute ago, John, one of my students who graduated in 2021 works for an international developer who takes unusual spaces and creates affordable housing by trucking in prefab development and can do it at a realistic cost. And the city was reticent in pushing back on this. I got Urban Pathways, who runs the shelter that I was in when I was homeless back in 2006, to build new housing, supportive housing, using this developer. And it's proof that it can be done. So a lot of this that we're arguing is about political will and how development controls the politics in the city. Let's be real about that, folks. When we elect somebody, they should be a representative government and having our best interest in mind. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever the case. um, cool. Very, very nicely said. Some great input here. I don't want to end this. I could go on for hours with this conversation.
But I have a question, John.
Alex,
I'm going to direct this at Layla, but anybody who knows. So when is the comment period over for, because a part of me just expanding is like, I feel like they ask for comments and input, but like, I sometimes I just think they're going to just do whatever they want, regardless of the input we give.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, Alex. And I think we all share this feeling that, we go and we comment and we feel that they're going to do whatever they want anyway. I think it is a dangerous path, because then we get discouraged, and we just cannot get discouraged. We need to continue to fight and to fight and to fight. And if it is, that we have every reason to be discouraged. But we are making a difference. I really want to emphasize that we are really making a difference. Even when we feel that people are not listening to us, they are. Even when we feel that people are discarding our ideas, it takes time. It's a long process, but we are being active. We are relevant, and we really need to continue to do what we're doing. So to answer specifically your question, the comment period at the City Planning Commission has concluded. They closed the comments sometime in at the end of July. Now the next phase is going to be, so the City Planning Commission is going to take a vote. We actually don't know when this vote is going to come, or maybe they updated the website today and we're going to see that it is on the agenda for this coming week. So the vote at the City Planning Commission is coming up. That is going to be the next phase. And then once the commission votes, it is going to go to the City Council. So if you are a resident of New York City, reach out to your council member, tell your council member what you like and what you don't like about the city of Yes. Tell them specifically what you want them to change. The City Council has the power to actually change the text, okay? So it is no longer in the hands of the mayor. It is now going to be in the hands of the City Council. And the City Council can be incredibly granular, meaning that, they can say in, Midtown, the zoning should say X, Y, and Z, or it can say, in parts of Queens that is zone manufacturing, the housing can be done in such and such fashion. So there is a way to actually make it a little bit less of one size fits all, and more tailored to the character of each neighborhood in New York City. So reach out to your city council member, tell them what you want. Reach out to your borough president, tell them what you want. Most borough presidents have already commented, but they continue to play a role in shaping the advocacy. And we do not know when the City Council is going to hold a hearing, but there will be a hearing at the City Council. We absolutely need to mobilize. It is really critical. If you remember, at the City Planning Commission, they basically did the tabulation of the number of comments in favor and those opposed, and they basically said, "Oh, look, we have more in favor." So when we show up and we say we don't like it, it matters because it means that, there is a majority of folks who are opposed. And once again, being opposed doesn't mean that we want to kill the project. Being opposed means we want to make it better. And as Rob said, we also have tons of solutions, tons of recommendations. John also said it in his fourth piece. He's actually coming with solutions and recommendations. Saying no is just the civic strong nudge to make it better.
Just quickly, there's a term that a lot of these council members and elected officials and city planning will use. They'll tell you they came into the community and did a consultation. But I get offended by that term because I believe that many times their mind is made up already. And in 2010, at a congressional conference in DC, I called Sean Donovan out for it. I said, you call it a consultation, I call it a non-sultation. And Sean's face turned very red because he understood that they came into our communities and did a dog and pony show when their minds were already made up. So sometimes we have to be confrontational. I'm not saying 24/7, right? But we have to push back. As Layla said, we have to say no sometimes. We don't want to blow up this whole plant, but there are some parts of it that we want to see fixed and repaired, right? And changed, right? I'm not a big fan of reform. I'd rather transform the system, but I'll take some reforms. When it comes to housing, yeah, let's reform the way we do business in this city.
Yeah, in saying that, Layla, yeah, great point. We know we have some political people that are pushing for it. They're subservient to the real estate industry. In saying what you're saying, that our hearing, our voice, and all that does matter, and I appreciate that because it's very heartening to, especially when I'm trying to find that light, that what I'm doing is effective. That what I think we all think that way. We want to be participants, and we want positive change. We're good-hearted souls, but then when it comes to serving the industry, it's strong. We know that. Besides our voice, I think when it comes down to the wire, it needs that critical mass more than ever, and we need to shout it out, and we need those rallies and so forth. Wouldn't you agree? Or how else would you follow up? How would you follow up besides going to a hearing, stating your voice? And certainly, you saw what happened with the community boards. You've got people on the inside trying to shift the conversation, trying to keep down, oppress the voices, and not even doing the necessary detail work that's needed to make such huge changes in our lives, in the city, in their face, of who we are as a civilization. So your thoughts, Layla?
Oh, my thoughts?
Yes.
I think that we have a voice, and this voice can actually be used many different ways. We can rally, we can testify, we can write op-eds, we can we can talk to our neighbors, we can inform people, we can educate people, we can call our council member, there are just so many ways, so many ways. The one thing that we should not be doing is sitting on our hands and saying, well, we can't do anything. That's the one thing we should not do. We should, and once again, whatever works for us. Talk to your neighbor. Talk, when you're picking up the mail and you bump into your neighbor, tell them, hey, the city of yes thing is actually not to our advantage. And those are the reasons. And this is how we can make it better. And Peter wrote something in the chat asking, what are the amendments? Once again, to me, the most important change that needs to be introduced is a housing mandate. We can do it under no matter of law is it not permitted. The Supreme Court has not ruled that an affordable housing mandate is not constitutional, that it would constitute a taking. It is not against the Fifth Amendment. There is absolutely no legal reason why a mandate is not possible. And this is what I am advocating for. And, others may have other ideas and, other views. But, to me, the most critical part in making the City of Yes proposal better is to actually have an affordable housing mandate.
Thank you. So can we, I'm sorry, somebody had
Yeah, I
something
was
to say?
going to say, we do mandates all the time in the state of New York and the city. So that makes no sense to me that you can't mandate things as a matter of public policy. Of course you can. And that's a non-starter. I mean, and that's just not the truth. And,
But
the question is, what would a mandate look like within the text amendments that are being proposed? What does that look like? Because of course you can propose mandates. I mean, there's no
Peter, if you ask the Department of City Planning, if you ask John Mengen, who is the architect of this proposal, he will tell you that a mandate would not be constitutional and that the city does not want to take the chance to expose themselves to litigation that would go all the way to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would basically, affirm that a mandate is not constitutional. I've had these conversations with him ad nauseam. And therefore, until we clear this hurdle with the department and, with the city and with the administration that is actually okay to mandate, then it's moot. And, does it make any sense to start thinking about what the mandate should look like? The city has already done mandates with, MAH is a mandate. MIH, I mean. MIH is in the books, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel in a terribly complicated fashion. And maybe the preference as it is written in City of Yes is converted from a preference to a mandate. That could be a possibility. The issue that we have right now with this administration is that they are digging their heels and they're saying that the mandate is not constitutional. And I'm sure you've had conversations with John Mengen and with the Department of City Planning. Reach out to them and ask them what is their position on mandate. Why is there not a mandate? And they will explain to you the way they have explained to me and to other of my colleagues, including constitutional lawyers who actually teach that very topic. That the mandate is not constitutional.
Well, folks, I hate to break it, but it's getting late. We went overtime here, and again, I just love these conversations, and I do want to close with a few things. But let's promise to come back next month and carry on this conversation. We'll have Tom with us, Tom Mengati. John, see if we can get those folks aboard to come in too. We'll put them on the agenda. Does that sound good, John?
Yes.
And then Peter, come back and we'll have more of this discussion. And Layla, you'll be with us, I'm sure, and Rob, and let's dig in a little deeper. Rashida, we'll start to focus on maybe we should spend an evening, a morning on what's good about it. Pull out the positive and also talk about what we need, in our communities. We're going to have a lot of discussion when it comes to that, I think, in our event on the 14th. I don't want anybody to forget about that. I didn't see any other hands, any public concerns, any last minute
John, just a quick I sent you an email. I forwarded you an email that I received from public housing advocates in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who I met at the same conference in 2010 in DC, who were still fighting around the issue of saving public housing in Minnesota. So I shared that to say sometimes these struggles are long term. We can't give up. The folks in Minnesota certainly haven't given up. And you can see how they keep commenting and going back to their elected officials and challenging them in ways just based on that email that I received. And I'm in a constant email chain with those folks.
Cool. We should invite those folks too. It's good to hear things, what's going on, and know that we're not so isolated, because this is a real national problem. Yes, our city's different than the suburbs, but this is a serious issue where our land is commoditized and we're pushed around. John, you had a
Minnesota is a very interesting case because Minneapolis did do zoning reform, and they are a different location than us. They do not have 100 billionaires or 200 billionaires or however many we have. They do not have oligarchs trying to buy $200 million apartments there. And so there's a guy there named Daniel Harriges, who's been part of this incremental housing movement, who put his money where his mouth was, and he built a 4-story apartment building that he lives in. And at that level, we need to build affordable housing, which means it has to be subsidized. But at that level, the apartments that Daniel Harriges built are in a similar market to the low-cost rentals. And it's not like building Lamborghinis. It's like adding 100 more Kias to the market. It does affect the market when you've got apples and apples. And actually, he's probably one of the ones I would ask to be part of this meeting next month. And either he or somebody he works with wrote a book with Strong Towns on this. And one of the things this book points out is that everywhere, part of the problem is the financialization of the housing market. And that, if you're building for a profit, you're going to get a different product than if you're building housing for everybody. And I recommend that book. It's by Charles Marone. I'll look it up. I'll put it in the chat. It's definitely not for New York City, but there is overlap with what we do.
John, we can learn from other places, right?
Sure.
And we have to be open-minded.
Sure.
And sometimes that's what we're guilty of, not being open-minded.
Sure.
Yeah, the answers are there. I mean, we see it in all around the globe, but when I heard them, the developers wanting to get involved with the politicians on this social housing, I wasn't seeing the social housing that's needed. I wasn't seeing the social housing that works around the globe. I saw it working for the developers. So that we cannot be partners with them. They need to develop for us. They need to be working for us. We can't, there's no partnership to be had again, we're split here. We want the basic human needs, and they want profit. So let's carry that conversation on. Let's focus on John. Let me know what we can get to. I think there's so much to discuss here. I think we have to break it down into sections. We have to think about, okay, what works, and then what we want, and what we're fleshing out what doesn't work. We're fleshing out. We got answers for a lot of things, and we've been thinking about these things, and we got places that works. I think we ought to bring those folks to the table, and I'm looking forward to speaking with those folks you mentioned, John and Rob, and to really digging in deep. This is what I call triage. This is what I think is really healthy. And Peter, for your questions and so forth, you've helped out in this matter. And Renee, you have something?
No. Something that really should be looked at. Is it a housing crisis or is it a vacancy and warehousing crisis? Because
Well,
that's something. Do
yeah,
we really need to constantly be building or do we actually have the house and we're not doing anything about it? And everyone just keeps talking about building, building, building.
yeah. I think some buildings necessary, but you're right. I think there's plenty, especially with the downturn. I think there's no balance here. I think you're right. That's a very good question to explore. We've explored it. We've talked about it. Um, uh, Sue Sussman is big on the warehousing issue, and Alex has been part of that. Alex and Sue and would have a huge discussion, input on this. It'd be good to have. Um, so yeah, you're right. I see it. I see the emptying out of buildings. I've seen them held just for investment. I've seen. Uh, I saw it in Midtown when they were building the hotels. The people that were pushed out of their homes. The empty. I can go to a building, any kind of building that's kind of looking for a developer. You can see it. You can see how they empty people from. They push people out of their homes, and they're doing this to elderly lady. Um, uh, I'm working with, um, and this is done in the name of okay, we don't need to have her in a such a large apartment. We can reduce her, push her into a smaller apartment. And because this damage was done, they allow the damage to continue. They allow the damage, they go without repairing these apartments in order to push people out. The things they do is horrifying, is mean. And I appreciate that, Renee. I think we ought to have a continue with that discussion. That's a huge part of it. So with that, I have nothing else to say. I've talked too much there, actually. Um, um, I just want to remind everybody about the event September 14th. Again, tables are there for you to talk to the people and speaker positions. They're open. We have it's called Communities Together, New York Social and Justice Music Festival. Alex, you want to put our link in there for the, or do you have it link in there for
Yeah, I'll put it again. It's www.communitiestogetherfest.org.
super. And again, need committees, people on committees, people on funding and finance, people on the board. If you have any interest, we'd love to have you. Um, and next meeting is first Tuesday of the month, October 1st, and we'll continue this discussion. And I haven't, anybody want the last word? Anybody at all? Okay. Thanks, Suzanne. I know your mic's out and I got your message. Pete, thanks for joining us. And Demiante, you came in late. Uh, I'm not sure where you're from. I recognize the name. Um, any last words from anyone? I see a telephone number here. Did you want to have anything to say? Okay. Rachel Stearns, any thoughts from you?
Very interesting meeting, and I'm glad you're holding these meetings. There are discussions taking place at them that I don't think are happening elsewhere. So I was happy to attend.
Okay, great. Let's bring people in. Let's bring them in. Let's build the base here. I know it's a holiday weekend, so I'll forgive the numbers. Janice, nice to see your name there. Please, I think everybody would love to see your lovely faces. Who's 323? Who's on the phone there? Okay, shy. Okay. Demiante, you want to introduce yourself? Say hello. Okay, you're having coffee or you're shy. Anyway, thanks for being here. All right, with that, we'll close the meeting. We'll look forward to next month and thank you again.